Ulduar best raid ever? Or simply overrated?
The Grand Crusader now released, it's once again got to that point in World of Warcraft where we have passed Ulduar as the main raid tier of the expansion. And I think that we can say, for those who wanted to experience this legendary raid,
it's harder than you thought, and it's more tedious for sure.
You have certainly had your chance to do so. And whilst Ulduar's re-release in 2023 was quite different to how it was back in 2009, so are many other things in WoW Classic. Biggest of all, the player base. Today I wanted to do a review of Ulduar in hindsight. There have been few raids as hyped up as this one. So did it live up to its lofty expectations, or was it a little bit overrated? Back in 2008, Naxxramas's re-release had the highest clear rate out of any raid ever.
Because it was just so easy. Naxx was just, I mean, the re-release of Naxx was just so easy, man. It is ridiculous.
It makes sense to bring it back though, seeing as how barely anyone cleared it during vanilla. And Blizzard wanted to make things a lot more accessible the second time around, and they certainly achieved that. Hardcore guilds cleared the content 2 days after the expansion released, and many more casual players would follow in the weeks and months to come. Whilst this was a simple step into raiding, which allowed more players to see the content, it lacked the challenge for higher end players to push towards. Ulduar would change this with a new, innovative raiding format.
The hard modes are cool.
The majority of bosses would have some kind of out or in-fight interaction that could be done to activate a more difficult version of the same fight. On XT you destroyed the heart, on Iron Council you did the bosses in a different order, and on Vezax you had your raid AFKing dodging shadow crashes for a minute.
This boss, listen, overall I actually really like Ulduar. I think all the bosses are very unique and special, but this boss I don't like this boss. I just don't think it's fun.
It's straight. Well, you do these days.
And like you can't see anything on the guy as well. I play a melee, right? He's so big that you just can't see anything what's going on. It's so frustrating.
Wait, more on that later though. There was also the Yogg-Saron fight where players could use a range of keepers to aid them, and Algalon, who had 1 hour worth of attempts per reset. And unlike many hard raids that had come before Ulduar, this one had no time gating, no resistance checking counters, and no suddenly needing double the amount of tanks you usually do. It was just plain difficult content on hard mode and more accessible on normal. This is
I actually think Ulduar overall is very great. I think the reason why it crumbled for me a little bit was because I was doing pucks with stream, and we had a lot of issues with some players not performing to a certain degree, and I have problems with kicking people if they underperform. So we ran into like a very big wall when it came to Ulduar, and I loved the raid. I really loved it, but it was very frustrating pucking it. I will say that.
Part of what gives the raid its legacy. It was the first real attempt by Blizzard to incorporate harder, optional modes into the majority of a raid. And for their first attempt, it worked pretty well. These days, though, we've had plenty of changes too. There were new achievements added, such as ahead of the curve for defeating Yogg, or cutting edge for having done all hard modes. The item level of non-tier loot was buffed across the board. Where 25-man hard mode used to be 239, now it was 252. This represented a significant power buff for all players across the board, and keeps certain BIS items in Ulduar relevant, even though we are now in Trial of the Grand Crusader. But the single biggest change was moving the raid to its pre-nerf difficulty. So when Blizzard initially announced Wrath of the Lich King, they said there were no plans to do any pre-nerf content in the expansion, but out of every raid during the expansion, Ulduar underwent a ton of different nerfs.
I think Ulduar was a very hard raid compared to everything we've gotten so far. Like, even Sunwell and like, you know, all those raids in TBC were not really like a challenge compared to Ulduar. Not only you kicking was the problem, also making the roster. Yeah, like it's becoming a bigger thing that maybe not TUGC, because TUGC seems pretty easy from what I've seen so far. I've only done it 10 men on heroic and then like 25 men on normal, but Ulduar was a big step in the direction of making raids a lot more difficult, and that's going to probably be even more apparent if we do end up getting Cataclysm Classic as well, right? The raids will be a lot more difficult for sure.
Boss damage being lowered, boss health being lowered, and certain mechanics being straight up removed. And as we approach this raid in Classic, I am thankful that Blizz did decide after all to go down the route of pre-nerf. Although for a Classic raid, Ulduar has been the most challenging so far, as very much predicted by many of us. I've been tracking the number of successful players in each raid after the second reset has gone by for a long time now. It's just out of interest really to see how each raid is stacking up. Whilst the Sunwell or Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest keep both sorted out.
Over here. I really like this raid too, though. I think this raid, Sunwell, was a very good in-between of not being too hard and not being a pushover. Like, it did take some progress and some stuff to get through the raids, but it wasn't, like, easy. I think it was this was, like, really, 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 really good, like, balance. It was a good balance between being difficult and, like, you know, casual players still being able to do it.
Thousands of clears by the end of the second reset. Many of Ulduar's hard modes were well below the 4-digit mark, with bosses such as Hodia, Mimiron, Iron Council, and Algalon being seen as very challenging. Let's not forget there was a pre-nerf hard mode that was never defeated. The mathematically impossible XT00.
I will just say, we almost got this guy down in our puck. The Guzu pucks almost managed to do this.
To hard mode, whose hard mode bonus health was nerfed down from 90% bonus to 40%. In other words, Blizzard had to reduce the boss's health by about 12.5 million, which for Wrath of the Lich King is a big number. Kel'Thuzad 25 and Nax had just under 50 mil health. Whilst I enjoyed the extra challenge and progression, there was no denying that Ulduar also felt like a departure from what Classic raiding has been so far. Classic has had its moments where you wipe a lot, Muru for example, but nothing on the consistent level of difficulty that Ulduar presented. I think Lich King 25 Heroic 0 buff will be the next big hurdle for guilds to overcome. And
this is definitely going to be very, very difficult. I actually never did this back in the day. Back in the day, I did a full clear of like your normal ICC and stuff like that, but I never got to do the heroic stuff, so I don't really know how difficult this is, but I would assume it's definitely a big contrast to it, because there's a whole new phase to the boss as well, which is really, really badass. There's like that ghost phase where you go into like the ephemeral realm or something like that.
Then in Cataclysm, assuming we get it, the difficulty starts to get far more extreme. It's not anything on the same level as modern day Mythic raiding, don't get me wrong, but it's another advancement in making raiding more and more challenging, a trend that continues the longer World of Warcraft advances. There was also quite the drop-off week to week as Ulduar progressed, and that could have had something to do with its difficulty. Or then again, maybe it was people touching grass in summer, or maybe it's the fact that Ulduar released on January 19th and Trial of the Grand Crusader came out on June 24th. But
I think it's just also players kind of just, especially when it's like a little bit more of a difficult raid, once they've kind of cleared it a little bit and they just end up farming it. Not everybody wants to be like pre-Fox and do like 15 raids per week, right? Some people just want to do it very, very chill, or not even any at all, right? Whenever they have it on farm. There's a lot of people that play it like that, right? Weak mental, I guess so, yeah. I mean, some people love raiding every single day, like multiple characters and stuff like that. And other people just, they kind of got bored of it. Once you have the stuff on farm, it loses its like interest of like, you know, grinding the raids every week.
There's 2 dates is 22 resets of Ulduar. Now I will say Blizzard actively had a goal to make Ulduar relevant content for longer than it was on its original release. Back in the day, Trial of the Grand Crusader came out, and the easily obtainable 245 item level loot from 10 heroic or 25 normal made the prospect of going to do Ulduar hard modes for up to 239 item level gear, well, just not all that appealing. But I will say these days, 22 resets was definitely a bit on the long side. Still, you'd think with 22 resets gone by, we would all be in our bis by now and just patiently waiting for Trial of the Grand Crusader to come out. And oh boy, how wrong would you be? Which leads to probably my single biggest issue with Ulduar. Hard mode, loot. So when you do a boss on heroic mode, all the loot is heroic and of the same item level. This makes pretty much everything useful to some degree. Every item may not be bis, but you can...
Tier GZ is just a crazy way of farming loot. Like, you just get so much. Even just doing a 10-man. When we did a 10-man the other day on the Rogue, there is so much stuff that dropped. It was ridiculous. And the final end where you get that chest as well, Like, if you're only 10 people, everybody's going to get a few pieces of loot almost. It's crazy.
Fill the gaps with things that drop, because a lot
it's
of
so
them
good
come
to catch
down
up.
to a stat difference. When you defeat a hard mode boss, you get
and the emblems. Every single boss drops 5 emblems as well. That is ridiculous, because you can do both 25-man and 10-man too, right?
Hard mode item, and that's on either 10 or 25-man. Each boss, remember, has multiple possible hard mode drops, so the chance you get the thing you want is not very good. Anyone else already feel like they've seen more Death's Verdict than Flare of the Heavens? And of course, the rest of the loot you get apart from your one hard mode item is just normal mode loot. The one exception to this was, of course, Algalon, whose entire loot table was hard mode items. But then again, when Algalon was the current raid, he was both very difficult and had a 1-hour timer before he would despawn for the week. I know not everyone should always be in their best gear, but at least with Heroic you have several chances from each boss to see the item you want, and not one. I think with the recent changes to War, Blizzard could have considered bosses now dropping 2 hard mode items instead of just 1. Also, it would have been good to have a better indicator in-game of which items are from hard mode. Heroic items say so on their tooltip, but hard mode items don't for some reason. I mean, yes, there are add-ons that...
I guess it's because it's not really a heroic, or it's just like a... I mean, I guess you could put a little thing hard mode item, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think we necessarily need to get more loot. I feel like there's plenty of ways to really get loot. I don't think that's a problem, like, at all. What's up, Mufford? That's what it needs, more loot? I don't think so at all, right? No. I think there's plenty of ways to get loot currently. Doesn't really need to be changing that, I think.
Do this, but it just seems like
I don't play a lot of characters, so maybe my...
On to the bosses, then. There was some that held up well, and...
Oh, no! This boss, this goddamn boss, holy crap, man. This was the most frustrating boss to do with the Pokemon. I don't know what it is about this guy, but people just didn't understand the lightning mechanic.
Some other ones. I have to say the normal mode bosses started to feel somewhat out of place after a while. I'm not sure why Blizzard back in the day opted to keep certain bosses normal mode only.
It's almost like whenever there's a hard mode and a non-hard mode, it almost feels like cheating if you're not doing it on hard mode, because you're not doing it on like the, I guess, intended way that the boss were supposed to be in a way, right? That's where, like, you know, normal heroic and mythic is a little bit different in retail, because there's big differentiations of like, okay, this is a normal heroic and mythic, right? Whereas, do you want to do the hard mode? Do you want to do the actual mode the way the boss was supposed to be, right? Or something else, Sereno. It's like playing Dark Souls with summons. It's just not right. It just feels like, I don't know, if you're like, oh, I guess we'll do it in normal mode because we can't do it on the hard one, right? Instead of like, okay, we do a TOGC normal, TOGC heroic, right? I kind of like that better in a way, but I think hard modes are cool though, to be fair.
When every boss has a normal mode anyways. Did they quite possibly just run out of time in making the raid
I don't know what that emote is, guys.
I don't hate the normal mode bosses, they just end up feeling like minor road bumps where you press all your cooldowns and just delete them. I'll also say I got the first real sense of progression on a fight during Yogg 0. In the early resets, the DPS check was very high, with many successful guilds bringing 6 to 7 affliction locks to meet the DPS needed in the last phase, which is exactly how this fight was defeated back in the day, by the way. Algalon was also interesting, but from a DPS point of view, you kind of just hit the boss whilst the tanks, star killers, and healers did the actual work.
DPS is kind of like hit their faces against the thing, right? Ayaya's achievement is basically her hard mode. Yeah, in a way. I mean, yeah, for sure. But it just feels like if there's like a hard mode and a non-hard mode, it feels like you're playing it in story mode if you aren't doing hard mode. That is very true, Headshot. It's a very good way of putting it, yeah.
Not so good bosses then. The first one that comes to mind is Hodia. I may have had a rant in the past where I called it one of the worst designed bosses of all time. And to be fair, visually the fight is a complete mess.
It's so hard to see where those little campfires are. Like, it... Yeah.
Mechanics are not displayed clearly in the encounter whatsoever. Weird. But once you understand the mess and know how to make the most of the various buffs, you can do some insane damage.
It's fun though, stacking up all the damage and like just being able to pump on him though. I will say that, but I guess what he means with it is like visually it's very, very not the greatest because there's so much stuff on the screen that it's hard to tell what's really going on. Almost like you're watching Retail Arena, right?
And the fight is 1 minute 30 or less due to the hard mode timer. So you know what, overall Hodia, not so bad. Vezak's hard mode, however, okay, we're going to do a new rant here. Whose idea was it to design a boss where you kind of have to point your camera towards the ceiling a little bit for the entire raid night. I know DBM handles warnings fairly well now, but
he's just too big. And the way that the mechanics are made from him is like they like those little grenades, whatever, they like fly out from him. It's just hard to see what's going on. Like, I think the boss fight is really, I mean, it's fine, I guess, for what it is, but it's just hard to see what's really happening, and it's really annoying.
Imagine progressing this back in the day. Also, it's got the longest run back if you do wipe by an enormous margin. The Shattered Walkway teleporter might as well be in a different postcode. And that's before we even get to the hard mode modification for the fight, where it takes 4 minutes total for the ad to spawn. And for most guilds nowadays, you burn the boss down to 5% health, and then you have to stop and sort of AFK while dodging shadow crashes, because
that's kind of annoying, in an annoying way of like really activating a hard mode. You just gotta wait till there's another of those primordial Saronites, and then you go into hard mode, right?
You need the ad to spawn for hard mode.
Those are not complaints, just play the gosh darn game. Well, that's clearly a complaint. I mean, if the boss fight isn't like intuitive and fun, that's definitely a complaint worthwhile taking into consideration. Though this is a 16-year-old game at this point, so like, you know, you can have a little bit of leeway with what you think about it, right?
Top of that, this boss drops a caster trinket as one of its hard mode items, which with its incredibly buffed item level is good for just about everyone that uses spells, meaning you're going to be coming back to this absolute disaster of a boss fight for a long time to come. Most bosses were pretty fun though. Freya was good. I like the different order of the ads that could spawn in and changing your strategy around that.
Yeah, she was fine.
Limeron's final phase was chaotic, but fun to see who could dodge mines, fires, shock blasts, barrage, missiles, and the firebots.
Seeing people run into those mines on Mimiron was fun though. Oh my god.
This comment goes for Wrath as an expansion, to be honest.
I do miss raiding a little bit like that.
But it could really use some more consistent boss aggro ranges, and for players to not enter combat until somebody in the raid has. I know it's a small thing, but pre-potting exists now, and can you tell me when the right time to pre-pot is on Algalon after a wipe? Because it seems to me like he just puts you in combat at some point before you can hit him. And on boss range, certain bosses, such as Hodir, you can be pretty much 20 yards away from, and others, like Freya, will aggro if you even so much think about hitting a trash pack within 40 yards of her.
Yeah, she has big aggro range.
I think Ulduar has held up as a very solid raid. The progression fights on launch are a ton of fun, with many memorable boss encounters for both the right and wrong reasons. 22 resets was definitely on the long side. It could have been a good 3 or so less, maybe even more. The overall theme, music, and ambience were great, as is very much expected from those areas of Blizzard's design team.
I think the raid, honestly, does it live up to like the way that it was, like the way that it's been praised? Yeah, I actually think so. I think the raid was overall absolutely fantastic and amazing. I just got a little bit burned out making the guzu pucks with the people from the community and stuff like that. But I actually I had a lot of really fond memories doing Ulduar. It was really fun overall, I would say. Refresh overlay. It should be refreshed, Mufford. I'll do it again though.
Normal mode bosses ended up feeling a bit
overall,
out of place,
I really enjoyed
to be honest. And the hard mode loot system just really wasn't it for me. Too much RNG and seeing a usable item. Despite all this, Ulduar has to be up there alongside the Sunwell as one of the top raids in Classic so far for me.
I agree.
I can't wait to see everything ICC Heroic has to offer now. I did a few of the bosses on Heroic back in the day, but I'm not going to have really done Wrath as an expansion until I've done Lich King 25 Heroic. But those are just my thoughts on Ulduar. What do you reckon for its re-release? Did Blizzard get anything wrong here? And has it lived up to our expectations?
I think overall, yes. I did kind of quit Wrath doing Ulduar a little bit, but I don't really think that's really because of the raid. I think the raid was genuinely very good. And it is a good raid.
Let me know below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. And I'll see you all in the next one very soon.
All right, good video. I'm excited to see how I'm gonna feel for ICC, because ICC was my favorite raid back in the day when I played, and I'm looking forward to it very much. Lord Maragor with the bone spikes, Death Whisper with all the ads, being able to big AoE. It's gonna be fun, I think. I'm looking forward to it, guys, for sure.